All right, so I got to see two 115-inch Samsung TVs, and I'm going to tell you all about them. Now, because I wasn't sure if I'm going to actually have one of these 115s in the house, I got to fly all the way to New Jersey to Samsung's new HQ in order to see them with a bunch of different creators, and it was pretty awesome. So I'm going to go over the different technologies and sort of tell you what micro-RGB really means. And then I'm going to go over some of the features of this new TV. And at the end, I'm going to give you my thoughts, including where it stands and in comparison to the bonus TV, the other 115-inch that I was talking about earlier. So let's jump right into it by going back in time to just LCD TVs. So we've had backlit LCD TVs for a while, and it was a pretty cool thing, right? Because there's OLED TVs over here that are really beautiful and self-emissive, but the fear of burn-in and also the lack of brightness sometimes makes them a little bit less ideal in bright rooms and in larger sizes. So mini LED has come through. First, it was just regular QLED or LED TV. Then it became mini LED, and now we got different companies kind of branching off in different directions trying to create the next best thing, right? And Hisense launched what they were calling RGB mini LED, and I think Sony has a very similar technology coming forth in the future. But from my understanding, both of those TVs are a backlight that takes the mini LEDs and turns them from just white or blue light into RGB, red, green, blue. So instead of just that white light coming through, your color filter or your dimming zones, creating some blooming, you're going to have all the different colors. It's going to provide more color and more brightness, right? But I think those RGBs aren't necessarily on the micro level. They're just still mini LEDs. But that's where Samsung has differentiated their TV. What they're saying is that their new micro RGB TV actually has very, very, very small LEDs that are pixel level. So these are even smaller than mini LEDs, and they're RGB. So you're not going to have just white light coming through the LCD panel. So this would give you even more control over the areas in the TV. Fantastic contrast, and actually each of the RGB LEDs are going to be less than 100 microns in size. So that is really, really, really small. But that, in addition to the micro RGB precision color Samsung has, is going to cover 100% of the BT 2020 color gamut. That is a new thing. I don't think any TV has ever been able to accomplish this. And I know some of my good buddies that test this sort of thing are going to put it to the test and find out if it gets all the way to 100%. So that's something that everyone is excited to test. But before we go too far, I just want to say that this is not micro LED. This is not the self-emissive panels that cost $200,000 to $300,000. This is still an LCD type panel. It is a panel that is going to emit light, and there may not be any color filter on this, is what Samsung is saying, but there will be dimming zones, and actually 4 times the amount of dimming zones from their QN90 series mini LEDs. But still, I think this is pretty revolutionary, and the fact that they're displaying this on a 115-inch is fantastic for me, because we love gigantic TVs. And to be honest, it looked very impressive. It looked very bright, vibrant. Unfortunately, we were not able to display our own content, so we were really just looking at what Samsung was providing. So obviously, I really want to get this in my house in order to kind of evaluate it in the way we do. Even though it's not super technical, it gives me a better understanding of how bright and vibrant the picture quality looks in my own environment. But from the short time that I got to spend with it and hearing from some of the other creators that were there and journalists, I think everyone is pretty impressed with this TV. So I do want to go over some of the key features, and the first one was just the micro RGB technology in itself. And the second feature is that we actually have a new processor called the MicroRGB AI engine that's specifically designed for this micro RGB TV. And I think that's important because it's going to have a lot more work to do. You're going to have up to 4 times the dimming zones as a typical QN90 series mini LEDs, so a lot more dimming zones there. You're also not going to have a color filter, so with regards to how those RGBs light up and turn off and turn back on and all that in the background, that is going to probably be more complicated as well. And so having its own new processor, I think, is very important for this TV. And something that I think is important for these larger TVs is what Samsung's calling the supersized picture enhancer, which is going to give specific qualities to a large TV that it might not get if it's just the normal processor for like a 55 or a 65 inch. As those pixels are bigger and as the picture is bigger, you're just going to have more issues with the picture quality in general. So posterization and some of the other things that you might have are supposed to be minimized with this supersized picture enhancer. And this is a 120 hertz panel that can actually do motion accelerated up to 144 hertz. So all 4 ports on this TV will do 4K 120 and up to 144 hertz. And while we're talking about refresh rate, we might as well just talk about the rest of the gaming features. It is going to have all of those great gaming features that you're used to with Samsung. You're going to have cloud gaming, you're going to have ALLM, VRR, you're going to have FreeSync Premium Pro, and the cool game bar. So all kinds of great features for gamers. So obviously if you're gonna buy this TV, gaming might be one of the use cases, but man, that's gonna be a big immersive screen to be gaming on. And if you're in a bright room, two positives. One, extremely bright TV with a lot of dimming zones, and you're gonna have glare-free finish. So the anti-glare coating is gonna extend to this TV specifically. That's a new feature in 2025 for some of the best QLED TVs that Samsung has. They're gonna have that same anti-glare on the MicroRGB TV. Now, a couple other features that Samsung has pointed out is that they do have 4K AI upscaling Pro on this TV. They have MicroRGB HDR Plus, which I'm not exactly sure what differentiates that between previous HDR models they've had, but they also are Pantone validated, and it has Dolby Atmos and Object Tracking Sound Plus, which I know that's a big deal because I absolutely love it when you can put a TV like this connected to, their own soundbar system and get fantastic sound out of it. Well, the TV on its own, but realistically, if you're going to be buying a TV that's upwards of possibly $30,000, I'm sure you're going to have some sort of home theater system, right? But all signs point to this being a pretty revolutionary TV design for Samsung with an impressive processor that's going to be doing a lot of work. So pretty cool features, pretty cool TV in general, and I thought it looked good in the limited time that I had at Samsung. Now, before I tell you where this stands in my opinion with regards to all the different TVs that have come out, I do want to let you know that they also showed us a 115-inch QN90F, which I thought looked absolutely fantastic in a brighter room too than the MicroRGB TV. They're just in two different rooms. They could have been flip-flopped, and I'm sure the RGB TV would have looked just fantastic in that brighter room as well. But the 115-inch QN90F looked amazing. They were showing some Superman content, and I know that that's a partnership that they have, but it was a great opportunity to see more real-life content that I would be watching over just HDR footage in the other room. And man, last year the QN90D at the 98-inch was a pretty good looking TV, but this year that 115-inch QN90F in the new room looked fantastic. I thought it was really awesome. Besides showing us its new processor and the glare-free finish and the 7 years of Tizen OS upgrades and its 144 hertz panel, we got to see one of the representatives control the TV with the watch. So that was cool as well. If you're in the Samsung ecosystem, it's just one of those bonus features that you can get with the Samsung TV. But the QN90F has been out for a while, so this really is just a larger size of a TV that's already been on the market. So I think that's pretty awesome as well, because it starts to get a little bit complicated when you start comparing all these different technologies and TVs and figure out what you should buy or what you can buy. So let me kind of do my best to explain that. So in general, I think, traditional mini LED TVs have kind of gotten to a point where they've maxed the technology. I think there's all kinds of great options for, the normal size 65, 75 inch, all the way up to 98-inch TVs that look fantastic right now. And to be honest, they're pretty inexpensive comparatively when you think about, 97-inch OLED TV that costs 30 grand. So I think you can get a great TV from many different companies, including Samsung, in the general sizes that you'd consider 98-inch and below. But when you get up to the 115-inch, that's where it's kind of getting a little bit crazy. And the options that you have go all the way from just those regular mini LED TVs all the way up to micro LED TVs that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I think are not very attainable for most people. But then you get into this mix now where they're trying to change the technology, and we already had talked about the Hisense RGB mini LED, which I thought was pretty impressive, and their UX TV from last year, really nice, right? So I think that's a great technology. I'm excited to see what Sony brings out in their version of this. Is it more like the Hisense? Is it more like the Samsung? But this Samsung MicroRGB is pretty cool, and I think it's another leap forward in technology that's going to make it even harder for OLED TVs to continue to scale, because it's just so expensive to do that self-emissive technology on a larger scale. And I think at least in the States, a lot of people are opting for larger TVs, though I do get a lot of comments that people say it's crazy that we get 98-inch or above, but I guess that's just what happens in the US. We got a lot of big walls, and people like to watch their sports and movies, and a lot of people just don't go to the theater anymore, unfortunately. But having a nice home theater at home is a great opportunity to skip on the UST projector and just go for a big, brighter screen. So I think this MicroRGB TV is pretty awesome. I'd love to see it in my house and kind of see where it stacks, but I think Samsung has their ducks in a row with the technology, having the new AI engine, precision color. If it's going to represent 100% of BT 2020 color gamut, that's awesome. And having something like the supersized picture enhancer is great for large TV watching. So I think they're onto something here. And to be honest, if we can't afford this 115-inch, I at least hope it moves the ball forward with regards to LED or LCD based TVs in general to make them more competitive and maybe just make the prices lower and lower for the consumers. So in the end, I think that's what most people are hoping for. I know people that are real videophiles may enjoy just the technology and want to see this thing live, but next step for me would be seeing it in the house and giving it a shot to go up against some of the other gigantic TVs that I've seen so far. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Is this revolutionary? Are you stoked for it? Or does it not really move the needle because what you really want is micro LED, the self-admissive 200-inch wall in your house? Let me know in the comments, and make sure to subscribe to the channel and smash the like button and all that. And I want to thank Samsung for bringing me out to see these new TVs. I'll see you guys in the next video.